Each community is a heaven in smaller form, and each angel a heaven in smallest form. The reason each community is a heaven in smaller form and each angel a heaven in smallest form is that the activity of love and faith is what makes heaven. This good activity is in every community of heaven and in every angel of a community. It does not matter that this activity is different and distinctive everywhere. It is still the activity of heaven. The only difference is that heaven has one activity here and another there. So whenever anyone is raised into any community of heaven, they say that she or he has arrived in heaven. They say of those who are there that they are in heaven, each in his or her own. All the people who have arrived in the other life realize this. So individuals who are standing outside or below heaven and looking off into the distance where there is a gathering of angels say that heaven is there and over there as well. It is rather like the situation of officials and functionaries and servants in a royal palace or court. Even though they live individually in their dwellings or in their rooms, some higher than others, still they are in a single palace or a single court, each one involved in a particular function in the service of the king. We can see from this what is meant by the Lord saying that in my Father's house there are many dwellings, and by the stories of heaven and the heavens of heavens in the prophets. We may also gather that a community is a heaven in lesser form, from the fact that the heavenly form in each community is of the same nature as it is in heaven overall. In heaven overall, the most outstanding individuals are in the center, and around them, in decreasing order all the way to the circumference, are those who are less outstanding. It follows also from the fact that the Lord leads all the people in the whole of heaven as though they were a single angel, and does the same for those who are in any particular community. As a result, sometimes a whole angelic community appears as a single entity in the form of an angel, a sight that the Lord has allowed me to see. Further, when the Lord appears in the midst of angels, he does not appear surrounded by a crowd, but as a lone individual in angelic form. This is why the Lord is called an angel in the Word, as is also a whole community. Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael are nothing but angelic communities that are given these names because of their functions. Just as a whole community is a heaven in lesser form, so too an angel is a heaven in least form. For heaven is not outside angels, but within them. Their deeper levels, the levels of their minds, are arranged in the form of heaven, and therefore are arranged to accept all the elements of heaven that are outside them. These elements they accept according to the quality of the goodness that is within them from the Lord. As a result, an angel is also a heaven. It can never be said that heaven is outside anyone. It is within, because every angel accepts the heaven that is outside in keeping with the heaven that is within. We can see, then, how mistaken people are who think that getting into heaven is simply a matter of being taken up among the angels, regardless of the quality of their inner life, who believe that heaven is granted merely because of the Lord's mercy. On the contrary, unless heaven is within an individual, nothing of the heaven that is outside flows in and is accepted. There are many spirits who hold this opinion and who, because of their faith, have been taken up into heaven. However, once they arrived, because their inner life was contrary to the life angels are engaged in, they began to be blinded in their understanding to the point that they became virtually idiotic, while in regard to their self-control, they began to be so tormented that they carried on like people gone mad. In short, people who have lived evil lives and who arrive in heaven bring their souls with them and are tormented like fish out of water, in the air, or like animals in the vacuum in air pumps once the air has been pumped out. It stands to reason then that heaven is within us and not outside. Since everyone accepts the heaven that is outside according to the quality of the heaven that is within, angels accept the Lord in the same way, because it is the Lord's divine nature that constitutes heaven. Consequently, when the Lord renders himself present in any particular community, his appearance depends on the nature of the good activity that community is engaged in. It is therefore not exactly the same in one community as in another. It is not that this difference is in the Lord. It is in the individuals who are seeing him from their own goodness and therefore in keeping with it. They are affected by the sight of him according to the quality of their own love. The ones who love him deeply are deeply moved, while the ones who love him less deeply are less deeply moved. Evil people who are outside of heaven find his presence intensely painful. When the Lord does appear in any community, he appears there as an angel, but he is identified by the divine quality that shines through. Further still, heaven is where the Lord is recognized, trusted, and loved. The different ways he is worshipped, in variations that stem from the difference of activity from one community to another, do not cause harm but bring benefit, because they are a source of heaven's perfection. It is hard to explain this in such a way that it can be grasped without resorting to expressions usually found in academic circles, and using them to explain how a perfect whole is formed from a variety of elements. Every perfect whole arises from a variety of elements. For a whole that is not composed of a variety of elements is not really anything. It has no form, and therefore no quality. However, when a whole does arise from a variety of elements, and the elements are in a perfected form in which each associates with the next in the series like a sympathetic friend, then it has a perfect quality. Heaven is, then, a single whole composed of a variety of elements arranged in the most perfect form. For of all forms, the form of heaven is the most perfect. We can see that this underlies all perfection from every instance of beauty, charm, and delight that moves both our senses and our spirits. Such instances arise and flow invariably from a harmonious agreement of many things that are in sympathetic concord, whether they are together simultaneously or follow in a sequence. They do not flow from a single unit that lacks plurality. So we say that variety delights, and recognize that the delight depends on the quality of the variety. We can see from this, as though in a mirror, how perfection stems from variety in heaven as well, since things that happen in the natural world offer us a reflection of things in the spiritual world. We can say the same of the church as we have of heaven, since the church is the Lord's heaven on earth. It also has many components, and yet each is called a church and is a church to the extent that the qualities of love and faith rule within it. In it, the Lord forms a single whole out of the varied elements and therefore makes a single church out of many churches. Much the same can be said of the individual member of the church as has been said about the church in general, namely that the church is within and not outside, and that anyone is a church in whom the Lord is present in the qualities of love and faith. Much the same can be said of the individual who has the church within, as has been said about the angel who has heaven within, that such an individual is a church in least form, as the angel is a heaven in least form. Even more, we can say that the individual who has the church within is a heaven just as much as an angel is, for we have been created to enter heaven and become angels. So anyone who has the quality of goodness from the Lord is an angel person. It is worth noting what we have in common with angels and what we possess that they lack. We have in common with angels the fact that our deeper levels are formed in the image of heaven, and that we also become images of heaven to the extent that we participate in the qualities of love and faith. What we have that angels lack is that our more outward levels are formed in the image of this world, and that to the extent that we are engaged in what is good, the world within us is subordinated to heaven and serves it, and that then the Lord is present with us on both levels as He is in His heaven. He is actually present on both levels in His divine order, for God is order. It should be noted in closing that people who have heaven within themselves have heaven not only in their larger or shared aspects, but also in their smallest or most specific ones, and that the smallest aspects in them reflect the largest. The reason for this is that as individuals, we are our love and have a quality that depends on the quality of the love that is ruling. Whatever rules flow into the specifics and arrange them and imposes everywhere an image of itself. In heaven, it is love for the Lord that rules, because the Lord is loved there above all else. As a result, the Lord is the sum and substance of everything there, flowing into absolutely everything, arranging everything, clothing everything with His likeness, and making heaven to be where He is. So an angel is a heaven in least form, a community a heaven in greater form, and all the communities together a heaven in greatest form. On the Lord's divine nature as constituting heaven, and on His being the sum and substance of heaven. The whole heaven, grasped as a single entity, reflects a single individual. It is a secret not yet known in this world that heaven, taken in a single all-inclusive grasp, reflects a single individual. In heaven, though, nothing is better known. Knowing this, knowing particulars and details about it, is the hallmark of angelic intelligence there. In fact, many other things follow from it, and do not come clearly and distinctly to mind without this as their general principle. Since angels do know that all the heavens, like their communities, reflect a single individual, they refer to heaven as the universal and divine human. Divine because the Lord's divine nature constitutes heaven. People who do not have an appropriate concept of spiritual and heavenly realities cannot grasp the fact that heavenly and spiritual realities are arranged and connected in this form and image. They think that the earthly and material elements that make up their outmost form really make them what they are, and that without them they would not be human. Let them know, though, that they are not human beings because of these elements, but because they are able to understand what is true and will what is good. These are the spiritual and heavenly realities that make them human. People do recognize that the humanity of every individual depends on the quality of her or his understanding and intentions. They can also realize that the earthly body is formed to serve them in this world and to perform useful actions in a suitable manner in this outmost sphere of nature. This is also why the body does not do anything on its own, but acts in complete obedience to the bidding of our understanding and intentions. This holds true even to the point that our tongue and mouth say whatever we think, and the body and its limbs do whatever we intend. The actor is therefore our understanding and intention, not the body on its own. We can see from this that matters of our understanding and intention are what make us human, and that these are in a similar form because they act into the very details of the body just the way an inner reality acts into an outer one. It is because of these facts that we are called inner and spiritual humans. Heaven is this kind of person in the greatest and most perfect form. This is the angelic concept of person, so angels never pay attention to what someone's body is doing, but rather to the intent from which the body is acting. They call this the essential person, together with the intellect to the extent that it is acting in unison with the intent. Actually, angels do not see heaven in a single overview in this kind of form, since the entire heaven does not lie within the scope of any angel's sight. However, they do consistently see particular communities that are made up of many thousands of angels as single units in this kind of form. And from the community as a sample, they draw their inference about the totality that is heaven. This is because in the most perfect form, the greater elements are arranged like the parts, and the parts like the greater elements. The only distinction is between what is greater and what is lesser. Therefore, they say that the entire heaven look like this in the Lord's sight, because the divine sees everything from the very center and summit, since heaven is governed by the Lord as though it were a single individual and therefore a single unit. We ourselves consist of countless different things, both overall and in our parts. We are made up overall of our limbs, organs, and viscera, and in our parts of a series of nerves, fibers, and blood vessels, made up of members within members, then, and parts within parts. Still, we do of course recognize that when we do anything, we do it as whole individuals. This is what heaven is like too, under the Lord's guardianship and guidance. The reason so many varied elements act as one in an individual is that there is nothing whatever there that does not contribute something to the common good and do something useful. The inclusive body serves its parts, and the parts serve the inclusive body, because the inclusive body is made up of parts, and the parts make up the inclusive body. So they provide for each other, respectively, they focus on each other mutually, and they are united in the kind of form that gives every single component a relationship to the inclusive entity and its well-being. This is what enables them to act as a unit. It is the same with assemblies in the heavens. People there unite in this kind of form in pursuit of any worthwhile activity. As a result, any individuals who do not serve some use for the larger body are cast out of heaven because they are misfits. To serve some use is to intend well to others for the sake of the common good, while not to serve some use is to intend well to others not for the sake of the common good, but for the sake of oneself. People who act in this latter fashion are people who love themselves above all, while people who act in the former fashion are the ones who love the Lord above all. This is why people in heaven act in unison, not from themselves, but from the Lord. They in fact focus on Him as the unique source of all, and on His kingdom as the commonwealth that is to be cared for. This is the meaning of the Lord's words, "Seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and everything will be given you in addition." Matthew 6:33. To seek His righteousness is to seek His good. There are people who in this world love the good of their country more than their own, and the good of their neighbor as their own. They are the ones who love and seek the kingdom of the Lord in the other life, since there the kingdom of the Lord takes the place of one's country. Further, people who love to do good to others, not for self-centered reasons, but for the sake of the good itself, are people who love their neighbor, since in the other life the good is one's neighbor. All individuals who are of this quality are in the universal human, that is, in heaven. Since heaven in its entirety does reflect a single individual, and is in fact the divine spiritual person in its greatest form and image, heaven is therefore differentiated into members and parts like a person, and these are given similar names. Angels know what member one community or another is in, and say that this community is in the member or province of the head, that one in the member or province of the chest, that one in the member or province of the genitals, and so on. In general, the highest or third heaven forms the head down to the neck, the middle or second forms the torso as far as the genitals and knees, and the lowest or first forms the feet to the very soles, and also the arms all the way to the fingers, since the arms and hands are among our lowest things, even though they are at our sides. We can see from this again why there are three heavens. Spirits who are below heaven are amazed when they hear and see that heaven is both below and above them. They have had the faith and opinion common to people in this world, that heaven is only overhead. They don't really know that the locations of the heavens are like the locations of the members and organs and viscera in a human being, with some above and some below, and that it is also like the locations of the parts within each member and outer or inner organ, with some within and some outside. This is the reason for their confusion about heaven. We have presented these statements about heaven as the universal human, because without them as preface, there can be no comprehension of whatever of the things about heaven that are to follow. No clear concept of heaven can be gained either, no clear concept of the union of the Lord with heaven, of the union of heaven with us on earth, of the inflow of the spiritual world into the natural world, and none whatever of correspondence, all of which must be discussed in sequence in the pages that now follow. This material has been presented first, then to shed light on these matters. Each community in the heavens reflects a single individual. Several times I have been allowed to see that each community of heaven reflects a single individual and is in the likeness of a human being as well. There was one community that was infiltrated by a number of spirits who knew how to assume the guise of angels of light. They were hypocrites. As they were being set apart by some angels, I observed that the whole community first looked like something cloudy, then gradually took on a human form, though still a cloudy one, and finally appeared in the light as a person. The individuals who were in that person and made it up were the ones who participated in the benevolence of that community. The others who were not in the person and did not make it up were hypocrites. These latter were cast out while the former ones were retained. This is how the separation was accomplished. Hypocrites are people who speak well and even behave well, but who are focused on themselves in specifics. They talk like angels about the Lord and heaven and love and heavenly life, and they also behave well so that their character seems to be in accord with their speech. However, they are thinking differently. They do not believe anything or will do well to anyone but themselves. Any good they do is done in their own interests. If it is in the interest of others, it is for the sake of appearance, and therefore in their own interest. I have also been allowed to see that a whole angelic community appears as a single entity in human form when the Lord makes himself present. High up toward the east, there appeared something that looked like a cloud, white at first and then reddening, surrounded by little stars. It came down, and as it gradually did so, it became brighter, and finally took on a perfect human form. The little stars that surrounded the cloud were angels who looked like that because of the light from the Lord. We do need to realize that even though all the individuals in a community of heaven look like a single entity in human likeness when they are all together, still one community is not the same person as any other. They are differentiated like the faces of individuals of one lineage. The reason for this is the same as that given earlier in this book, namely, that they differ depending on the various good activities that they participate in and that gives them their form. Those communities that are in the central or highest heaven and are at its center appear in the most perfect and lovely human form. It is worth noting that the more members there are in a single community and the more united they are in action, the more perfect is their human form. This is because variety arranged in a heavenly form makes perfection as explained above, and variety occurs where there are many individuals. Every community in heaven is growing in numbers daily, and the more it grows, the more perfect it becomes. In this way, not only is the community perfected, but heaven in general is perfected as well, since the communities constitute heaven. Since heaven is perfected by its numerical growth, we can see how mistaken people are who believe that heaven will be closed to prevent overcrowding. Actually, it is just the reverse. It will never be closed. and its ever-increasing fullness makes it more perfect. So angels long for nothing more than to have new angel guests arrive there. The reason each community appears in human likeness when it is seen all together as a unit is that heaven as a whole has this likeness, as may be seen in the preceding chapter. And in the most perfect form, like the form of heaven, there's a likeness of parts and whole, of lesser and greatest. The lesser elements and parts of heaven are the communities of which it consists, each of which is a heaven in lesser form. The reason for this constant likeness is that in the heavens all the qualities stem from a single love, and therefore from a single source. The single love that is the origin of everything good in heaven is love for the Lord from the Lord. This is why all heaven is a likeness of Him on the grand scale, every community a likeness on a less grand scale, and every angel in specific. The single love that is the origin of everything good in heaven is love for the Lord from the Lord. This is why all heaven is a likeness of Him on the grand scale, every community a likeness on a less grand scale, and every angel in specific.